Happy Friday, Hunter. Welcome to our first week in review.
Happy Friday.
So we got some news of the week that we're going to go through. First ever time doing a podcast officially, I guess. And yeah, let's talk about some things. We built out a little docket, and let's dive right in. So um, first thing that I have here, seems like everybody's talking about uh, news in the stock market related to Intel. The latest one, kind of the hits keep on coming. The latest one yesterday was that they're postponing their innovation event, which was slated for September. But earlier this week, there's some people talking about delays and postponements in certain products. And uh, Pat's been tweeting some more Bible verses. So uh, Dylan Patel from Semi-Analysis was on Twitter saying that he's built a sentiment analysis model that can correlate Pat's tweets on and references to Bible verses with the movements in Intel stock prices. Um, I think an initial take from me is that it seems to particularly affect the consumer business, but obviously it's across the board. What are you seeing or hearing?
So I think that the PC enthusiast community is extremely vocal about things like this. So anytime you have an issue like what was exposed with the 13th and 14th gen core series CPUs drawing more voltage than they should, resulting in a much shorter than expected lifespan of the CPU. Got a lot of coverage and news press coverage because they've always been such a very vocal community, right? I mean, anytime any of the companies like Asus or Gigabyte or any of those get, exposed as doing either something shady or otherwise, I mean, everyone knows about it, right? It's all over Reddit, it's all over the tech sites. I think that coupled with there's been a lot of rumors about delays of Arrow Lake now coming. Some of the development challenges that Intel's historically had have started to surface. The fact that Foundry is bleeding billions of dollars of cash despite getting a lot of money from the CHIPS Act in the US. I think people are starting to ask some tough questions, but I'm almost wondering, and I mean, I have literally zero evidence to back this up, but I'm almost wondering if this can be closely related to what happened with Boeing, where it's like this is systemic rot in an organization that's been covered up for decades and is now finally starting to come to a head. You know, like you have to wonder if something like that's been going on, right? Because Intel's a massive company and there's a lot of people working on a lot of different things. And it's feel like much easier in 100,000+ employee company to sweep things under the rug, so to speak, or at least just kick the can down the road, right? And like, hey, we'll deal with that in, some other time.
Well, and so with that said, why now? Like when you think about the posture of the Moore's Law company, and I think Jim Keller said it the best, so I'll just repeat what he said a few years ago. I think he was working at AMD at the time or something like that, but he was certainly part of the Zen core architecture team or led it. And he basically said that, Intel was the Moore's Law company, but they said Denard scaling is dead, and they believe there's only going to be 10% improvements per year or something like that. Transistor density can only scale based on the process of the fabrication, stuff like that. Meanwhile, AMD is saying, no, we're going for chiplets. We're going to increase the size of the die. We're going to like do all of these things and just we're going to go 2x in 2 years. And Jim said both companies executed according to their plan.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, why now? Like we're sitting in August of 2024, the stock price is down 54% in the past 6 months from the screen I'm looking at right now. Google search, right? Um, but the company's still got an $84 billion market cap and billions of dollars being invested in the foundry business. One of the first moves that Pat made when he rejoined the company as CEO was to focus the company. Like, you know, a lot of products that were kind of meandering along. Maybe they're profitable individually, but they're not strategic to the business going forward, like persistent memory, like a lot of their uh, network cards, like the FPGA business, um, the Nirvana acquisition. They seem to be still investing heavily in Gaudi, so the Habana acquisition is playing out. Many of the software companies we've seen them acquire, like Converge and Granulate, things that we work on. I don't know. It seems like, yeah, okay, it's existential to the company, but if it's also existential to the United States of America, then the foundry business is going to be delivered like a database migration at a company that takes too long. Well, it goes over budget, it takes too long, and so it goes over budget and it takes too long. It's not like anything happens. You still are going to migrate the database. You're not going to turn this thing
Yeah,
off or whatever, right?
right.
So Intel's going to migrate the foundry business, and it's kind of going to go from there. I don't know.
You have to wonder if at least a part of it was just collateral damage from the bubble that we're in currently, you know, and cracks are starting to form, like that article that I sent you about 600 billion being spent on AI, and there's really not much to show for it.
Yeah,
Um,
the Sequoia guys.
yeah, yep. And so you have to wonder if at least part of this is also a macro effect, right? But then you look today and all the semi stocks are bouncing back, right? Basically almost erasing losses. Um,
Yeah, we heard a lot of stuff in the news. I'm sharing my screen just so we can see what we're talking about a little bit with Intel, significant losses in the market, and then this $600 billion question article from Sequoia written by David Kahn. Um, Obviously, pointing out the macro effect that's happening in the market with NVIDIA ripping to all-time highs, AMD doing pretty well, and Intel just being the other side of that trade. But it does seem like if we shift to macro for a second and we think about all the news about the Japanese yen trade unwinding earlier this week, meanwhile, it's like already bounced back. Like,
yeah,
what's going on? My favorite um, quote from this one, I saw a tweet earlier this week. I'll throw that on screen as well. Um, May we never forget Reddit users ZSD 99's everlasting wisdom. Don't even ask the question. The answer is yes. It's priced in. Right? We saw this week with like the spread trade on the yen unwinding or whatever people were doing,
carry
borrowing in
trade.
Japanese currency.
Yeah,
Yeah, carry. I'm not a markets guy. But it's priced in, I guess. Everything's priced in. So where to now?
yeah. I mean, basically, in all right, real quick primer on carry trades, right? Just super fast, 10 seconds. Basically, carry trade is you borrow in the currency of a place where interest rates are low and you use it to invest in a place where interest rates are high, right? That's what a carry trade is. And when Japan decided to raise interest rates, that basically blew up everybody's carry trades. So, you know, you want to go super macro above the tech sector, you've got stuff like that going on that typically when institutional investors have to start unwinding those positions, that's when you start to see things, shit the bed, like what we saw earlier this week.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we saw some other stuff. This isn't all just pile on Intel. If everybody depends on the fabs. Anissa Gardizi from The Information at a scoop, I guess, on August 2nd that NVIDIA's new Blackwell GPUs will be delayed by 3 months or more due to design flaws, she says, affecting customers that have collectively ordered tens of billions of dollars worth of the chips. This week, NVIDIA told Microsoft about the delay. Um, Not sure how much exactly, we can comment on some of those claims in the tweet, but certainly she was the first one to make this very public. And yeah, there's clearly a repercussion on people's view on NVIDIA and what's going on right now, right? But I don't know. I've been working with NVIDIA for a number of years, and we saw this in like 2017 with V100, in I think roughly 2020 with A100. Um, Now we've got H100. It's 2023, 2024, and we're going forward for B100. It seems like it's kind of hard to launch new chips and have them ship exactly accurately at full capacity right away. What do you
Yeah,
make
well,
of the delays being public now that NVIDIA is like the most valuable company in the world or close to it?
when you consistently push the boundaries of fab capabilities, this is kind of where you end up, right? I mean, eventually you run into the brick wall that is new fab techniques are not as proven, they don't scale very well, and they're extremely expensive, right? So if you're NVIDIA and you're going to TSMC and saying, hey, we came up with this design, please make this, TSMC is trying to do their own financial dance of how much do we invest in production lines that can do this if we only have one buyer, right?
Yeah.
So they're trying to play the balancing act of, well, we could improve the process, which would then increase yields. Um, but if we only have one customer, what's the point? But that customer also, on the flip side of the coin, happens to be the most valuable company in the world. So at what point do you say, okay, yeah, we understand it's one customer, but we should probably make the investments here?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, you've seen this from everyone else in who makes chips, right? I mean, when Intel, for example, launches a new Xeon processor, the yields are 50% maybe, until a certain amount of months later when the yields are now 80+%, right, off of a wafer. So it takes time to get this stuff rolling, and maybe it's a situation where NVIDIA went out and talked to all these hyperscalers and got a bunch of pre-orders for Blackwell, and the pre-order volume was so massive. And then TSMC was like, well, wait a minute, we can't fulfill this.
Hmm.
Like, it's going to take us a year to go through this backlog. And by then, you're going to be asking us for X100 if you follow Jensen's plan of like releasing an iteration every year.
Jensen's plan to release an iteration every year seems pretty aggressive. But hey, H200 also debuted on uh, in preview on the MLPerf inference results from this summer. That's quite the stopgap for a lot of customers if they're just looking for more performance, which B100 is expected to provide, B200 as well. And the claim in the information's article is 3 months, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, that seems pretty small when we think about the build outs that these systems take and the lifespan, right? Remember, I mean, the launch of any of these GPUs, like there's many people still using um, 2 generation old V100 to train models that's
Yeah.
got a 5 to 7 year lifespan. So okay,
Yeah, I think,
V100 goes into production 3 months later. That's I don't know. People are going to be using that through to 2030 or something like that.
yeah, I think the outstanding question that I have is Is this a manufacturing problem or a design problem? We've obviously seen the articles calling it a design flaw that was not discovered until very late in the development phase. But given what I just said about, manufacturing processes and how long they take to scale with high yields, you kind of have to wonder, like, what does NVIDIA do from here? Do they just release a stopgap chip that's half the promised performance of B200 while, they hold out for, and focus all their energy and efforts on X100? Or do they really try to fix this and just release it late? Those are kind of the questions that I have is, what do you do if you're in that position? Because I feel like it's a little bit, at least a little bit of a lose-lose situation.
Yeah, release late seems like an interesting one. I'll make a general comment. Well, okay, first a specific comment on the platform. Here's the tweets from Dylan Patel of Sentiment Analysis talking about the shipment delays, um, saying that he sent out the update to his clients on July 22nd, which seems to correspond with when a lot of people heard the news for the first time in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
And then, he's got his estimates of the old schedule and the new schedule, which I think the bigger impact is what you were saying is not necessarily the timeline of like when this stuff comes online and when they really produce it. It's just the volume.
Yeah.
That they're in this business now where their individual customers are so big that people pre-order stuff, uh, you know, because it's just a supercomputer. It's an integrated system. It all comes together. It's not just a chip, right?
Yep.
It's the servers, it's the racks, it's the cooling, it's the network. And they're effectively releasing, you know, a switch, an HCA, like a network card, the chip, and the server all at once. And if there's a long pull in that tent, suddenly everything slows down. And
Right.
I remember when Jensen at the last GTC was, I don't know if he was talking to investors or something, but there's a lot of new people paying attention to NVIDIA right now, which is my second comment. As somebody who's been following GTC for a number of years, it's funny how much of the content now is like around let's revisit how this stuff really works. After 5 years of like, you know, let's talk about how the FP4 data type's going to work on Blackwell, or it's something like super specific. It's like,
Yeah.
no, no, actually, guys, remember, we keep saying chip, but this thing is like, the individual chip is like 40,000 bucks. It's, 50 pounds. It has 400 components, and look at it here. Like it's the size of my torso. That's not really what people think of when they think of chip and they pick up their phone or their
Right.
laptop and they go like, there's something inside there that NVIDIA produces. So yeah, general comment. It's fascinating to see that like, what I would say is like mainstream technology and business media is having discussions about TSMC, ASML, the
Mm-hmm.
supply chain, how fragile all this stuff is. And you're like, I don't know, it feels cool that the whole world seems to be paying attention to the stuff that I've found interesting for a number of years.
Yeah, and um it was always interesting to me to see, like you said, like ASML in the news. Like the average person watching all of this happen has to 100% has to go Google who ASML is. But if you follow the manufacturing process, you would know that ASML is they make the machines, right? I mean, they make the equipment necessary to produce these chips. And so, it is also interesting to me to see a lot of these names in the news and people talking about yields and people talking about, manufacturing capacity and like stuff that you and I would follow being in this space, but the average person would not care about or not even know existed.
Yeah. I mean, it's so funny. Um, I was in Eindhoven in the Netherlands recently, and they've got the um, Philips uh, museum, like the history of Philips there,
Hmm.
and it's it's an incredible town. First of all, the Dutch like train system getting there from Amsterdam is incredible. You go stop off at all these cities, tap your card on and off. It's all clean and fast and stuff like
Hmm.
that. But you get to Eindhoven and Philips is obviously clearly important there. But you think and it's like okay, ASML spin off of Philips, TSMC joint venture with the Taiwan government. This one little cradle of the high tech industry in this town that's not even one of the big towns in not even one of the big countries in Europe uh, is kind of making the world go round, which is really really cool to see to see in person. And then something was pointed out to me that the prevalence of autism in Eindhoven is around 2.3% compared to other Dutch towns, which is less than 1%, the standard rate in in the world. So yeah, it attracts people to work on some very specific things and get
Hmm.
really excited and interested in them, which is crazy. Let's move on to one last thing and then wrap here. So uh, there was another article to I guess pick on NVIDIA and make this entire first episode all about the chip manufacturers. Um, but let's talk about the models because NVIDIA does something that's a little bit different than everybody else. There's a an article from 44 Media saying that leaked documents show NVIDIA is scraping a human lifetime, quote unquote, of videos per day to train AI, which kind of goes towards the general feeling of like let's say the supply chain of data for AI. Um, I said long poles in the tent. It's not always chips and switches and cables and people. In some cases, getting access to data. What's your take on that?
Yeah, so I think what we're starting to see happen here, if you look at kind of what's transpired over the past year is you've had this gold rush of people trying to create foundation models, make them better. Some people who are just taking the foundation models and fine tuning them are wanting to consume content from external sources, what you would normally consider as publicly available content, whether that be stuff from X or Reddit or, you know, image hosts, things like that, right? Like they're wanting to bring all of that stuff in to give multiple dimensions to the model. And I think what you're starting to see is the creative industry is or the content creators are pushing back on that, saying, well, hey, if you want to use this, you're going to pay me for it. You've seen the New York Times do this, you've seen Reddit do this, you've seen some of these other places who previously were basically freely getting their websites and content scraped.
Hmm.
Now pushing back and saying, no, you can't use this, and we're going to sue you if you do, unless you pay us. And it's even sparked this whole debate of what's considered fair use and what isn't, right? Um, in addition to that, there's long been in the web development space, right? There's long been a common method of blocking these scraping engines, which is called I call it robots.txt, but it's basically the robots exclusion protocol, right?
Yeah.
So this basically is a small text file that you put on your web server that says you are not allowed to scrape me. Perplexity AI and a few others have been publicly accused of circumventing this robot exclusion protocol and continuing to scrape a lot of this content. Um, and that's kind of reignited the debate, especially in the was it the News Media Alliance specifically is um, concerned about the impact that this has, and they're calling for new ways of excluding these scrapers from scraping their content, unless, of course, they pay for access directly to the data through an API or something like that to make it easy to consume. So
Yeah.
my thought is, where do you draw the line, right? If you look at the history of the internet, it's free and open space to exchange ideas, right? I mean, that was you look at the people who pioneered the creation of the internet, that was kind of their um, mission statement, if you will. So now it's like, where do you draw the line? Because I see both sides of it. I see content creators not, wanting to continue to make money off of their content. And I also see the other side of it, which is, how do we make these foundation models better without this content?
Well, yeah, I think there's it's really interesting from both sides. We got to have a longer discussion about how this plays out. Um, I'll throw two more articles on screen, and then I think we got to wrap here. So the first one that I think applies here kind of argues from the other side. Earlier this week, Google was found to have an illegal monopoly on search, according to a U.S. judge. And I would say that there's both a fair use legal issue here, and then there's also an antitrust issue here. Google has run their business with the quality of their uh, like web crawling.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you can say it's all about the uh, kind of the semantic search capability of the question, like the handling of the question, but it's very much about their crawler. Like, and okay, other people are trying to create a crawler and they're getting shot down by fair use policy violations and things because they're choosing to not display a link to the person to go find that, but to kind of synthesize it through this thing called a model, which a lot of people think of AI as just a compression algorithm for all of this web information right now. It's becoming more clear that it behaves that way with LLMs. So I don't know. That's okay. This is super fascinating. I think we can have a longer discussion on it. I want to leave one last thought that I liked from this week from SWYX on Twitter. Uh, he says, who runs his own podcast called Latent Space, which is fantastic. He says, in software engineering, you start by making it work, then you make it right, then you make it fast. In AI engineering, you make it work on one thing you want, then you make it work generally on most user questions or queries, and then you make it efficient. And I think that's a fascinating backdrop to kind of lead into maybe next week's episode where we talk a little bit more about software and use cases and less about the chips that underlie all of this. Because, man, a lot of AI still feels like research and not like engineering right now. So,
Making it up as you go, man.
all right. This was fun. Good first
Yeah,
week. Good
yeah.
to talk
We
to you, man.
will. We will see you next week.